Are we recording? Ah, there it is. Excellent. Okay, so welcome everybody. We're going to talk about learning through linting. And a quick introduction, my name is Mindy Zwanziger. It's pronounced like Swan Tigger, but with Z's. I'm a software engineer at New Relic. Looks like my video just went out for some reason. There it is. Okay. So yeah, I'm a software engineer at New Relic. Just a little bit about me, my background. I actually entered tech as a former middle school and high school teacher. I was looking for my next career, and to make the switch, I attended an online coding school called Launch School. And I also apologize if you can hear my child who is in the other room because he is possibly teething and a little bit loud. But anyhow, I also have Colab Lab and Agile PDX's mob programming workshop listed under education because so much of software engineering goes beyond the can I do this to like technically and into the can I actually do this and communicate it effectively. And I feel like Collab Lab and the mob programming workshop were pretty integral in my understanding of those and learning and growing in that. So I always like to include those and talk about it. If you're in Portland, the Agile PDX mob programming workshop has been on hold for a little while, but they are starting up again soon, hopefully even at New Relic. That's my goal. So hopefully we can see you there at some point in the future if that is of interest to you. And then, yeah, I am a software engineer at New Relic. I'm on the engineering operations team and been there for a couple of years now. So a little bit of what we're going to do today, we're going to do some introductions. You've heard about me. We're going to kind of introduce you all as well. And then we're talking about what linting is, why you might use it, and maybe why you might not want to at the same time. We're going to walk through setting up a linter, and that's kind of an interactive spot where I'm hoping all of y'all can do that as well. And then we're gonna actually use that linter to hopefully learn some new things. Before we get there, there's some logistics to get out of the way. There's a GitHub repo that has some resources we're going to use today. I'm going to copy and paste that into the chat. We'll have an opportunity to actually go through and like you can clone that to your computer and that sort of thing later on. So don't worry too much about it. Just kind of want to give you a heads up about it. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Zoom chat. I'm going to try and keep an eye on that as we go through. Also, we were going to do some breakout rooms. We might end up just kind of hanging out in here with all of us since it is a bit of a smaller group, which sounds great. I think that'll be fun. And then also, I really, really like to make my talks interactive. And in this case, we have some cool tools that you're going to be working through and figuring out as we go, and hopefully talking with each other through it. But I also want to just give a caveat. It doesn't have to be as interactive as you, or it can be as interactive as you want it to be. So if you don't know JavaScript that well, or because we're going to be working in JavaScript, or you're just like your setup's not working, or if you're in your car and driving, you can just watch, and that's totally fine as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. So the first little interactive thing that I'd like to do is just introductions, so we're kind of more comfortable with each other while we're working through some of the technical stuff a little bit later. So I'd love to go around the room and just talk about what your name is and something that made you happy this week. And I did not prepare one for myself because I was not expecting to do this. So I might have to go second if somebody else has one, if they would like to go first.
I can go first because I was happy just an hour ago. I had something at work that I was working on for a chunk of time and was not making much progress at all. And I had the opportunity to pair with somebody that I don't usually get to pair with at the end of the day. And she and I had a really good time doing it. And at the very end, when we were just about to give up for the day, tried one other thing and it worked. And it wasn't something that worked in a way that like we solved the whole problem, but just like the console log was toggling the way that it should be. It was a very like low bar for success, was just like to get it to do a thing. And so that was a technical thing that made me happy, but it's very recent. So I still feel that little bit of joy from that right now. Oh, And my name's Kelly.
Love that. I'll go next. So my name is Mindy, and something that made me happy this week was I got a special, or my husband won a special invitation to go to like a soft opening for a new location for a restaurant. So Steeplejack Brewing, which is over on Broadway here in Portland, they have a new location in Southwest, and so on Saturday we got to go and enjoy an afternoon together, which was really nice. So if somebody else wants to pop up with their introduction.
I can go. I'm Zenzi. I am a QA person over at Clarity as well. And let's see, one thing that made me happy today especially was that I've been struggling with insomnia, and I nodded off at like 7:30 here, because I'm on the East Coast as well. And when I woke up, my children had assembled a piece of furniture that's been sitting in my living room for like months. So I'm stoked. I'm pretty happy right now.
Yay.
I can go next. My name says Max Murphy, but this is my husband's computer. My name is actually Marilee. And I studied elementary education. Mindy, your story reminded me of mine. And last year I did a boot camp, and I got hired in January as a software engineer for PayScale. So I'm still learning a lot. But something that made me happy this week is I'm in Portland and my 6-year-old got into the David Douglas charter school that we wanted him to get into. We just found out he was on the wait list. So that made me really happy this week.
Nice. When I saw Larry posted that.
No,
Go ahead,
ahead.
Casey.
Go ahead.
No, Larry posted that he doesn't have a mic enabled, but there's a QA engineer at Downstream and was happy to work in his yard yesterday.
Zanzi, that sounds awesome. I just wanted to say that because that sounds really cool. It's awesome that your children did that for you. My name is Casey. I am a recently employed junior developer at Powin, a company based out of Tualatin, but also with an office in Portland. I was a server and bartender for many, many years, and decided when the pandemic started to change my course and did a boot camp and a couple of self-paced courses. And I'm really happy because this weekend I went to see a band. It's the first time I've been to a concert since the pandemic started, and it's a band I've wanted to see for about 14 years, but they're an Icelandic band, so they're not around all the time. And that made me very happy.
That's cool.
Yeah, Icelandic. That's fascinating.
Yeah, hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Smita, and I'm living in Portland, Oregon. My happy week this, past 2 weeks back, I have completed my full stack web developer course. Still now I'm searching for jobs and applying for jobs. But suddenly yesterday I got some response from one company. That's the happy moment for me because, searching jobs is very frustrating thing. Yesterday I got some response. Yeah.
Congratulations,
Yeah.
Smita. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. But still I got a response, still some more stages also here because I need to give an interview and he needs to hire me. Yeah.
Super exciting. Yeah, and super unnerving.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for doing that. Hopefully we all feel a little bit more comfortable now, can move forward and learn some stuff together. This is great. So moving right along, we're going to start off with talking about what linting is in the first place, because some folks don't know what that is, and that's great. Linting is the process of automatically checking your code for errors or style inconsistencies. And there are a lot of tools that allow you to do this, and they're fairly different depending on what language that you're using. Some of them are pretty similar, but they are available for most modern languages, if not all. And they even have one for accessibility. So pro tip, if you're interested in that and making your applications a little bit more accessible, you can look up Axe linter, and that's available for you as well. They're also pretty configurable. So I actually even have mine set up to auto fix some of the issues that I run into most often. Namely, I forget to put semicolons on the end of all of our JavaScript files, or throughout the JavaScript file. And that is something that our team has decided to do. So a file is saved and it auto fixes a whole subset of some of the more common issues, which is great for me. It saves a ton of time. You can also change exactly what it's looking for. So some folks really don't like semicolons, and you can actually tell it to not allow there to be semicolons at all. And you can decide, okay, I want this to actually be an error if there are semicolons, or I can allow it to be just a warning. So you can kind of tune it to your specifications a lot of the time. There's also some blocking capabilities. So for instance, if you as a team have decided on a subset of styles that you're expecting to have happen in your code base, and you're trying to push a branch or merge a branch that maybe has some inconsistencies with that style that you've decided, you can have something show up that says, oh, you can't push that branch right now. You need to fix those errors first, or you can't merge this branch until you fix those errors. There's a lot of different configuration options in there that you can do. There's also a subset of, or a selection of style guides for some languages. We're talking about JavaScript a lot here today because that is kind of the more common language. A lot of folks have learned JavaScript. So a few different style guides that are available for JavaScript are the Airbnb style guide, the standard JavaScript style guide, and the Google style guide. Those are all available in the chat for you as well, so you can take a look at those. My personal favorite is the Airbnb. I feel like their style guide is really easy to read, is kind of like the main thing for me. So that's where my team uses Airbnb as kind of their base as well. So that's kind of the basics of what linting is. And you'll see a little bit more of that in action a little bit later as we get into it. So a few reasons why you might want to use linting. You can have hopefully faster code reviews, so you're not having to be quite as nitpicky about semicolons, single quotes versus double quotes. You're not taking the time within those code reviews to discuss style anymore. It's all laid out for you, and you can just kind of move forward. It can also lead to more readable code. So if you have a consistent style throughout your entire code base, or ideally through all of your services, if you have multiple services on your team, going from repo to repo or from file to file, you are always expecting the same thing, and it looks the same. So it's a lot easier to read. I'd also mention, if you are looking for a job, or if you are in the middle of interviews, or maybe just remember this for the next time you are looking for a job, style should never be the reason you don't get a job, in my opinion, because style is very easy to correct and easy to move forward and easy to align with the team that you join. But it can make it so that your submission is a lot easier to read. And if you can make it as easy as possible on the people who are deciding whether or not you get an interview, that's going to be to your benefit. So applying an Airbnb style guide or a Google style guide to your code submissions is probably gonna make it so it's a little bit easier for your interviewers. So hot tip there. It'll also allow you to kind of catch some errors or common pitfalls. There have been a handful of different situations where I've looked at something and they're like, you shouldn't do this. Like, this is bad because of runtime, or this is, there's a way to do that that's a little bit better for whatever reason it is. And I'm like, oh, what is that? Which leads kind of into that last bullet point of teaches you new skills. There's been a handful of situations where I had no idea what it was talking about at all. So I was able to go in and do some research and figure it out. And then I had a whole new skill and could understand what it was that I needed to do differently. So can teach you new skills. And that's really my goal for today. Is I'm kind of hoping that through the process of applying a linter to some code that I've purposely written to not match the style guide that we'll be able to teach. Like maybe you'll learn something new today through that process. So there are some cons. Learning detours take time. So if you get caught up in a lot of those where you're like, I don't really understand this, I don't really understand this, I don't really understand this, it could take a lot of time, but I personally think that's worth it. So we're going to move on from that one. Sometimes people like to make it so their code is fixed with the linter, just kind of like making it work so the linter's happy, but it's not actually great code. And there are some situations where the choice that the linter is giving you maybe isn't the best for the situation you're in. And you need to be able to make that choice of actually, we're going to go ahead and ignore the linter in this particular circumstance because it's the best choice for the code. So there is a balance there. I think the biggest one is that style can be divisive. So a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. If you go onto Twitter and look at JavaScript semicolons, you're going to have a lot of different opinions, a lot of people with a lot of strong different opinions about, yes, you definitely should, or no, you definitely shouldn't. Single quotes versus double quotes, like all sorts of different things. And it can be hard to get around that. Hopefully you end up on a team, or you're on a team where you can kind of discuss those things. One particular aspect of that, if you are on a team and you're trying to figure that out, is to hold those opinions pretty loosely. Have opinions, have strong opinions, but hold them loosely. Talk about them, explain your reasoning behind it. But if the rest of your team's like, we want to go this way for this particular reason, go for it, move on, let it be. But if you are running into a situation where a rule is like constantly bothering you, it's good to communicate with your team when that rule isn't working as well. We recently on my team went through and basically revamped. We took a bunch of we had a lot of different styles chosen for different services, and we kind of gathered them all together and decided these are the new styles that we're going to abide by. But we found that there were a couple of things that just got in the way constantly. And I think being able to actually bring those up and say, well, yeah, this isn't working, is very valuable. So be willing to do that. And the last thing on there is to not just ignore the rules. Sometimes they're very pesky. Sometimes you're like, I have tried a few different things and it's just not working the way I want it to. And there is an option where you can say, like, disable the rule for this particular line, disable the rule for this whole file, like just kind of ignore it for this particular situation. And again, sometimes that is the best choice, but I would actually say that's pretty rare. Most of the time you can make your code fit in a way that's better for the code base and fits the style choices that style rules that your team has selected. So and you lose out on that learning opportunity if you just ignore it. If you don't know how to fix it, go and ask somebody and see if you can make that work in that regard. But I would just say, use it sparingly when you ignore rules. Use that ability pretty sparingly. So that kind of is like a overarching big picture idea of linting. We're going to go through and actually do it together, which always goes super well. If you've ever been in a workshop of this sort of thing, almost always there's something where somebody's computer just doesn't work. And so hopefully we can move forward without that happening. Fingers crossed. And like I said earlier, my goal is that you can experience the idea of learning through linting today through this process that we're going to do together. And I mentioned also that we're going to use JavaScript. We're also going to use ESLint, which is one of the more popular linters for JavaScript as well, just again from a popularity standpoint. So I'm going to get out of my presentation view and let's open up a new Chrome window. Oops, not a new that window. There we go. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clone that GitHub repo that we came across earlier, and I'm going to copy paste that into the chat again, just in case somebody doesn't have it handy. There we go. And you should see the code up in the top right. You can click on that and click on our copy image here. And just as you normally would with getting a repo cloned, however you're most comfortable with it, if it's not something you're super familiar with, I like to go to my terminal in my, go to terminal. And then I have a specific little folder that I go to. And then we'll do git clone and paste in that copied URL from GitHub. And hopefully everybody has Visual Studio Code installed. That's kind of what the plan was for today. If you don't, no worries. It might be good to do what you can. I'm not sure how well it will translate if you do not have Visual Studio Code, but do what you can. And if all else fails, you can just watch and we'll learn together. If you wanted to open it up in Visual Studio Code, you can do code and then learning through linting. And that should open up a new Visual Studio Code workspace. Okay. And then I'm going to toggle my terminal here. There we go. So I like having a terminal within my VS Code workspace. And we're going to actually follow the directions in our ESLint Getting Started guide. So I will copy paste that link as well so you have it handy. I think part of the reason I like to use the actual ESLint file or website here, because then if you ever want to do this again, this already looks familiar and isn't this like super new intimidating space. You can just use what you've already seen and use it again in a different project. So there's 3 basic steps here in getting it installed. We have an npm install, npm init, and then an npx command. So we're going to walk through those together. Although actually I'm going to back up for just a second and talk through what I have here in that repo. The 2 big things that we're going to be dealing with are this example exercise. That's kind of what we're going to do together. I'm going to walk us through that. And then hopefully during the group exercise, if there's somebody else who's kind of willing to chat through that, or if we want to work through those kind of individually and then come back together, we'll approach that as we get a little bit closer. Those are the 2 big pieces there. And then the others are kind of just things that make it work, or a README, which has some information about it as well. So just give you a little tour of that. Okay, so our 3 steps here, I'm going to use npm. If you'd like to use yarn, you can, but I like npm. So I'm going to copy paste this first command here, npm install ESLint save dev, and we'll run that in the terminal. And added our package lock with some, well, added our package, added stuff to our package here. It added ESLint as a dev dependency. And then it ran the npm install as well. So that shows our package lock information. Our next one here is npm init ESLint config. And so that's going to help us set up a configuration file for this particular project. And it'll walk us through like there's a little workflow that it goes through. So I'm going to make this maybe a little bit bigger here. I wonder if I can make it bigger. Aha, great. Okay. So it'll ask us a series of questions here. The first one is it needs to install the packages. Is that okay? And we're going to say yes. And then how would you like to use ESLint? There's a few different options. I'm going to choose the bottom one here, which is to check syntax, find problems, and enforce the code style. And then what type of modules does your project use? There's either the import export option or the require exports, if that's familiar to you. For this, we don't need any of those. So we're just going to go ahead and say none of these. Which framework does your project use? We're not using React or Vue.js, so we're just going to say none of these. Our project does not use TypeScript, so we can say no. Our code is going to run in Node. So we'll select Node. And then we're going to use a popular style guide. So we'll start with Airbnb. Again, that's the one I'm most familiar with. And we're going to take a quick detour. There is an option here that says, what format do you want your config file to be in? And there's JavaScript, YAML, and JSON. So I actually have in our repo here, there are a few different example files, so you can kind of look at what those look like. JavaScript looks like this. It is a module export here. Should look fairly familiar for those of you who are into JavaScript. I already have ESLint installed as an extension. That's great. We're going to install it here in a little bit, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. JSON and then our YAML file. Personally, I like the YAML file the best, but I like YAML in general. Although most of ours on my team, we use JSON pretty much all the time. So that's what I'm actually most familiar with, but I like YAML quite a lot. Okay, so back down here. Oops. Oh dear. Wonder how I can go backwards. All right, I'm going to start over. Yes. Enforce code style. None of these. None of these. No. Node. There we go. JSON. Okay, JSON is the one to select on that one. And then there are some dependencies that are of the ESLint, Airbnb ESLint. And so you can choose yes to install those now with npm, and that'll install those as well for you. All right, so that was that step. It added a JSON file for us. You can tell here, there's a list of environments that it works in, or that we're expecting. You can tell it's extending the Airbnb style guide, and it's taking a look at the ECMA version, the JavaScript version is the latest. You'll notice there's an empty object here of rules. I am actually going to ask that you go ahead and copy and paste the host set that I have in a different part of the repo here. There's this rules.json, just because I think it makes things a little more interesting. So starting from line 2 and then going all the way down to line 96, we'll copy that whole chunk. Control C. And we'll replace the rules section here. Control V. So that'll be more fun, because this is fun for me. I like this kind of thing. All right, and the next step we're going to do here, we can run ESLint on just a particular file. So that's what this command does here, npx ESLint, and then whatever the file name is. So npx ESLint, and let's do the example exercise. So example exercise.js is what you'll want to type in there. And what that'll do is it'll give us a list of all of the errors, all of the things that go against the styles that we've decided on, the rules that we've decided on. But it doesn't, it helps because it tells us that there's something wrong, but it doesn't really show us where those issues are or give us much of an idea of how we might fix them. So something that's really useful for VS Code, and Zenzi already has it, is the ESLint extension. So I went a little too fast probably. So here's our file explorer. Our extensions are over here on the left-hand side. I think if they're not on the left-hand side, you might also be able to find them up here somewhere, but I can't remember where. Maybe under, I'm not sure. I think it usually comes with extensions on the left-hand side. So unless you messed with that, it probably is there. And then you can search for ESLint up there and click on install. Once you've installed that, I'll give you a minute to do that actually. If you go back to your files, you'll notice that things have turned red, which is always a fun thing. And then it'll show you now what where all of those errors are with VS Code. Little red squigglies are so fun. And with that, it'll tell you if you hover over any of those red squigglies, you'll see what it is that's wrong with that particular section. So in this situation, it says unexpected var, use let or const instead. And then it also gives you the name of the rule that it is that you're breaking at the moment. And that is actually a link. If you click on it, it'll open up in our ESLint website. Let's see here. And here are the docs for that particular error, for that particular rule. And you can go through and look at, okay, examples of incorrect code for this rule, example of correct code for this rule. Excuse me, and has different configuration options for a lot of these. This particular one is fairly simple, it's straightforward, so there's not a ton of configuration for it, but some of these, you would be surprised by how much you can configure. So in this case, there are a couple different solutions to it. We can just know, okay, we need to make that a let or we need to make that a const. There should also be this little quick fix option. If you click on that, you'll have a few different options here. There's another link for showing the documentation. There's a fix this particular scenario where there's a no var problem. You can disable it for the line, and let's actually take a look and show you what that looks like. So if this is the ignoring rules thing that I was telling you about, you can ignore it and now it's no longer showing you that it's a problem. And that's a little comment that it adds into that. Actually, we can also show you what it looks like for the entire file. So there's also the option for disabling it for the entire file. So if we had another var in here, something like that, it's still not giving us a, it's still not giving us an error for the var because it's disabled for the entire file. So there's also the quick fix option of just fixing all auto fixable problems. We're going to go ahead and choose this first one, and it automatically changes it to let for us, which is great. Although it gives us another error here. It says numbers is never reassigned. You can use const instead. Let's go ahead and change that to const. And now we have that line is gone with the red squiggles. So I'm going to go through and we're going to just talk through each of the other ones that are here. So increase by 1 is never reassigned. Use const instead. So that's another situation where we can just go ahead and change this to const. And this one yells at us because it says the array literal notation is preferable. And if you weren't sure what that means, you can go to no array constructor and it'll show you that it wants you to use I'm not entirely sure if it actually showed exactly what I wanted it to show. But what it means is this. Use brackets instead of the writing out new array. And that was part of the Airbnb style guide. Another one I see often actually with folks is using variables that are really
Mindy?
short. Yes.
Sorry, do you know on that last one, was there an option for quick fix? Because I was curious if that's one that would have come up with it or not, because
oh, it does show you right here that the literal notation with the brackets is preferable.
okay,
Quick
yeah,
fix.
because I know that sometimes I don't feel like it is harder. It takes some investigation to figure out how to fix things, and sometimes it provides it really nicely. And so that actually is nice that it showed it in the little blurb right there then too.
Yeah, although
Yeah,
it wasn't purely evident from that. Like I wouldn't have been like, oh, I need to replace it with brackets. So sometimes it definitely does require.
Know.
Yeah, or you dig into it. And again, that's like the learning opportunity there really is to sit there and dig into it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
This actually doesn't give a quick fix option either. So that one could take some time to figure out if you weren't in the know. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, and going back to this one, the I see a lot of folks who like to do variables that are really short, and that's kind of generally considered bad form. And so what you could do instead is let num equal 0 and change all of this to num instead of I. Another one I see often is using the unary. Actually, I've never said that word out loud before. The plus plus. It was a very common way of writing add one to that particular variable, but it's one that's kind of gone out of vogue a little bit. And so instead of using the plus plus, they want you to use plus equals 1. And I think I forgot some spaces in there. Yeah, operator must be spaced. There we go. And then this should also be num. And then the last one that's on here is the console log. So a lot of folks use console log throughout their code, and sometimes it's totally useful and needed. And sometimes it's not a great sign. Sometimes what you really want to use console log for in a lot of logging situation, or a lot of programs, is for debugging purposes, and it shouldn't necessarily go to the console. It should go there's different ways of approaching that. So for our team, we generally try to stay away from console logs if at all possible, in all of our services. However, that's kind of not normal. So what I want to show you now is how you could actually change that. So if you didn't want it to be an error, what you could do is you could go into your ESLint file. And we have all of this long list of rules that are added onto the Airbnb base set of rules. And one of them is the no console. So right now it's set to error. So it's going to show you that red squiggle. And it would, if you had it set up to block with merges or block for pushing, then it would block your movement forward in this particular branch. If you wanted to change that, you could set it to just warn instead of being an error. And you'll notice this is now kind of a golden color, so it's not red anymore. And these are kind of a golden color, so it's not red anymore. It's like a warning of, this might not be the best idea, but we'll move forward and let you do it if you want to. If you wanted to just turn it off completely, you can choose off, and that will turn it off completely. There we go. Some more details about that, actually, I bet. Let's see here. I'm going to go off script here for a second. And hopefully it works out for me. If I click on no console, again, that takes you to the ESLint docs, and it can tell you that there are different options. So let's see here. So here's the options section. You can have an allow array that either warns or errors for you. I'm going to find a good example of I will say with ESLint, sometimes the configurations are a little bit less than straightforward in the rules. Like you kind of have to sit there and parse it out a little bit. Like they'll have very long objects or very long arrays that you're just like, wait, how does that work? And you kind of have to play with it or sit there and sort through it and try and figure out if you want to change your rule. The configuration can be kind of tricky in that regard. Okay, so that was a lot of me talking. There is a whole another section with a whole other set of things that could be updated to match the rules. And my goal is for us to originally it was going to be to separate off into small groups, and each group kind of work on it how they would like to do that. Since there's such a small group today, I think we could just go ahead and stay within this group, but I would love to take a back seat. So if there are a couple different options, and I'd love to hear from all of you what you kind of want to do. If somebody's comfortable with it and wanted to share their screen, and as a group, we could talk through what needs to change, that is an option. Or if we'd like to just kind of take a few minutes individually and work through a few of the options and then kind of come back together and talk through them, whichever is preferable. So I'd love to hear from you all what your thoughts are in that regard. Ready, go. And I will say the other option is for me to go through it and just have everybody watch if that's what the comfort level we're at right now.
Do you want somebody to walk through the other errors in the other file? Is that what you were saying?
Who's willing to share their screen and like have as a group kind of contribute to fixing those errors, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. I'd be down to do that.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Okay. Is there anything that needs to be done as far as sharing screen permissions?
I don't think so, but the main way to figure that out is, Casey, do you see a button that says share screen on your Zoom?
I think I'm about to take it over. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Let's see.
We'll know shortly.
All right. Do you see my
We do.
Yeah.
Yes.
my VS Code? All right then. All right then. And so we were looking at group exercise, right?
Yeah, and actually I could explain what it is that the program does, just to give an overview on that. That is something that I was planning on doing and forgot to do. So basically what it is, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a process input. And that's basically like the first function that this goes through. So you give an array of strings, and it's going to check and see if each of those strings passes a particular set of rules. So back up at the top, there are two functions up there. Is less than 10 characters and starts with an alpha character. If both of those are true, then the program will output a message that says your input is valid. If not, then it's going to output your input is invalid, along with some information about why. So it's kind of just a basic program I slapped together so that we could use it to talk about.
It's a validation program. Yeah, validation
Yes.
script.
Yep.
All right. So should we run it first to see what happens, or should we just go through and go through the errors in it?
Sure. If to run it, you would do node group exercise.js, and that should work. There we go.
So invalid non-alpha character, too long. So I guess these two were valid.
Yeah,
No?
and I think actually the first one is also valid. So, but overall in the array, there was at least one input that was invalid.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to call it's going to parse the input. So it goes up to parse input. Let's find that first. All right. The first thing, parse input, doesn't like this new array. It's the same constructor we saw before. The same error we saw before. It just wants us to define a new array as, automatically did that for me, using the brackets. So let's see, and then the input array dot length. Oh yes, this is the whole thing here. I see. There. It's going to check the length. Everything's good there. It doesn't seem to like, what's it he say here? Iterators and generators require regenerator runtime. It's too heavyweight for this guy. Separately, loops should be avoided in favor of array iterations. So basically, I think it wants me to use a, let's see, maybe a for loop. No. Oh,
Well,
so
that's
many
a lot of options in there. I don't think I've ever seen it come up with that many possibilities.
Quite a few possibilities there. All right. Let's see. Let's check this. Let's see what it says when you go to no restricted syntax. All right. So this seems to be a pretty broad statement about. Yeah, this seems to be a pretty broad statement. And so this is this more of a style error, I'm guessing? Oh, you probably can't see that on my screen because I have it just sharing my VS Code. Oops.
Yeah, I just shared the docs there.
I can change that and just do my screen entirely, actually. So it took me to here.
There you go. Yeah, and I think that's actually something that is set by the Airbnb configs. So this is probably the toughest little block. I kind of left this one I would,
Left it hanging.
yeah, I kind of purposely left it a big one in there was kind of an extra hard to
Okay.
fix just for,
Well, so this seems like so it says using, it wants me to use an array iteration, or loops should be avoided in favor of array iterations. So either a uh, a map or a for each function on top of the array is probably what it's looking for.
yeah.
So, yeah, and then there's a lot. So there's a lot of things. I'm sure there's a lot of things it doesn't like here. Okay, so
Maybe I was a bit too much.
no, it's okay. It'd be fun to pick apart. Anybody else have any ideas about what we should do to break this down?
I guess I wonder about trying to pull out some of the easier syntax errors first to be able to have, so there's less of it that's showing up as all red, to be able to make it a little easier to identify where this trickier one actually comes from, because there's so much there that's red that it's a little overwhelming to me to try and know where to start. And I don't know
Yeah.
what's a good way to do it. I think I often get excited about seeing all the little red lines, and so tend to start at the top of the page and work my way down through it.
I was going to say, I think
Well,
I threw off Mindy's Mindy's presentation instead of going in order. I was like, let's follow the order of the script itself.
Although
I
I
thought
really
that
like
was-
that.
I
Yeah.
did too. I've never done it that way before, and I thought that was actually a really interesting way to approach it.
Yeah, that's when I'm trying to figure out what something does. I will very often, that's how I approach it, is like, if I have no idea what it does, I start with, okay, well, where is this going to take me next? And then what is that doing?
Mhm.
Although I do know a lot of people will be like, okay, well, they'll try to identify all of the things first. So we could do that first, little warm up practice if that's what everybody would like.
I think either way works on it. I think, yeah, I think you're driving and we can try and solve
Okay.
where you put us. So,
All right, so I'm sure it doesn't like this.
mhm.
It doesn't like the short variable name. So let's give it instead of I, let's rename this.
Item or something.
Sure. And for anybody who doesn't know, I hit Control-Shift-L to find all instances of I.
Always love
Nice.
tricks like that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely share all of
Although-
the VS Code shortcuts.
Although that gets annoying when you do use I in multiple loops, because then it will change every single thing. But more reason not to use them in the first place, right? Okay, so now all of these have been changed to item, but it still seems to not like all of that. So I think it seems that the biggest problem it seems to be saying up here is that it wants me to use an array iterator. So instead of using this for loop, we say input array for each, we'll say. I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Or we could do a map because it's adding it to the input details. But let's start here. For each item. Now we'll take this and put that down. Oh, well, it doesn't like that that's still there. That seems to have gotten rid of a lot of them.
Mhm.
Nice.
These are obvious because it's just a single line at the end it wants me to put. Semicolons to end the line. Now let's see what this one says. It doesn't like that the line is beyond I thought it was an 80 character as the generalized limit, but maximum is 100. So we can just carry this over.
That was a change that my team had made for ourselves, because a lot of these rules are just taken from my team's ESLint file, and we just 80 seemed very short. Didn't like it. We wanted it a little bit longer. So that was one of the situations where we talked about it as a team and we're like, can we just make this a little bit longer?
It especially gets really short once you have nesting that gets into here and you're starting at line or column 40, because then no. But
Indeed, yeah.
Okay. It wants me to put the parentheses here, which aren't necessary with just one item, but with multiple items it is, and it's a good stylized.
That's actually one that our team, you can set it how many you want it to have. Like you can set it so that it doesn't gripe at that one, or that it does gripe at it for the number in the item.
Is that one where you can set it so it's like if it has 3 items instead of just more than one?
Yeah.
Or yeah, you can specify
Yeah, so if it's,
exactly.
you can say if it only has 1, don't worry about the parentheses around it, but if it has more than 1, then it has to have that.
That's cool. That's good to know that you can pick and choose there. All right, so since we're following along, let's see. Input details is valid. Is set to input details is valid. So I guess it means as long as it's still valid. I see. That's why it came up down here with it's saying one of your inputs is not valid. It doesn't care which one, but as long as it's still valid and the current item is less than 10 characters. So let's go to less than 10 characters. If I hold control and click, it'll take me up there. Unexpected block statement surrounding arrow body. Because it's yelling at me because it's only one line. So if I'm using an arrow function notation, I should just be able to put this here. In parentheses. Is that what it's asking for? No.
Semicolon.
Yep.
Semicolon. I've been doing all my coding in Java. You would think I'm on top of that one, but apparently not. I'm sure it's going to yell at me about the same thing here, but then also it might yell at me about the formatting of the statement itself. So we'll see. Multiple spaces only wants me to have one space there. Nope, it likes that. All right. So these would return, both of these would return back down to here. And now it's going to say, if it fails this, then invalid too long. So it's going to come up to possible responses to find that. Well, it's exactly 4. Oh. I'm guessing that would say it was 3 instead of 4. Oh, found 2. Oh, wait.
Maybe accidentally press delete twice.
I think my backspace might be sticking a little. What is it not like about this? Is never reassigned. Okay. So instead of let, we're going to use const.
Looks like we're almost done.
Yeah.
Thanks, Casey, for walking us through it.
Does anybody else want to give a go at this one?
All right. I think it's the same problem as the other one that we ran into. So we could just use another for each loop, I believe.
And because I've set console on to warn, I can see the yellow underneath the red there. It doesn't like the fact that I'm console logging either. Yep. But we can just do it's going to yell at me about this as well. And of course,
It saved you on something else too, yeah.
because it's not response message, it's response messages. And
Which is really
this
nice to have it save you on, because that's the sort of thing that you can hunt forever to not see.
Just the other day, my teammate was blocked for about an hour and a half before she reached out for help, and it was a rogue T in the middle of a variable name that made the whole thing crashing down.
Yeah,
That's killer. Awesome. Thank you so much, Casey.
No problem.
It's great that we had such a small group that we can kind of all talk together, but I think it definitely puts you on the spot a little bit. I appreciate you stepping up to that.
That's okay. It was fun.
Good. And hopefully everybody got a chance to kind of play around with it and learn a little bit as you go. Yeah, I have just like one more slide, I think, just kind of on some resources. And I think that is
steal the screen back from me.
Really the end of the presentation. Yeah, let me move over there. So if we have any other questions or anything like that, where did my screen go? There we go. Okay, so yeah, so there's some resources listed, and I think I also had of course I opened the wrong screen share here. There's a link to the slides as well, so if you could have access to that if you want it. Yeah.
Thanks. I will post that also in our stuff afterwards.
Awesome. All right. There is also, I did include a link there to a DigitalOcean tutorial on how to make it, like set up your VS Code so that you can do auto saving, and it'll fix all of the little things like those pesky semicolons or whatever it is that you have set to do that. There's a selection of the ESLint rules that are auto fixable. Some of them are, some of them are not, but you can have it so it does the auto fixable ones at the very least. So yep, that's all I got for you. I don't know if anybody has any questions, comments, opinions, or experience that they've had with linters, either positive or negative.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for giving the talk. I think it's really, really useful. I'll wait to say anything and let anybody else pipe in here, though.
I was going to say the same thing. Like, thank you. I know what linters are, but I didn't even realize I thought I had ESLint installed, but apparently I didn't. So thanks for walking me through that. And yes, they definitely save you, as was exemplified just earlier, just a moment ago. It's like, hey, this is not correct. You're like, oh, you're right, it isn't.
Oh, and I see a question in the chat. I++ is no longer accepted. It still works. It's just, I think it is out of vogue, if you will. Most folks want to see the plus equals just because it's a little bit more explanatory about what's going on. More clear.
I think it's also easily confused with ++I, which will add one before it performs the operation.
Right. Yeah. My coworker was very sad to hear that ++ is gone.
Yeah, I'm sure anyone who uses C++ feels slighted.
That was actually his exact response. That's funny.
Hey, Mindy, I have actually a question, not necessarily exactly about linting, but more about VS Code. It's an editor that I've seen more and more people adopting and taking on, and a bunch of folks on my team have recently switched over to VS Code, and so I'm kind of pondering it myself. I just need to summon the will to change all of my habits and such. But yeah, I'm kind of curious, like, how you enjoy working in VS Code, what you think about it, if you recommend it as an editor to switch to.
Yeah, I mean, I really like it. I like it a lot because there are a handful of really helpful extensions. And like including New Relic has a code stream, the New Relic code stream extension. That's very cool and actually ties directly into New Relic, which is very neat and very helpful. But you can also, connect to GitHub and that sort of thing. You can actually do all of your GitHub actions with the extension, I believe, which is kind of crazy. I love the colorizer piece of it. That's one of my favorite things is having the brackets all colorized, but I know that exists in other environments as well, like IDs and stuff too. So a lot of, I mean, there's so much debate about different IDEs that you use. And I know some folks are very into Vim, for instance, and a lot of the stuff that you can get on VS Code, you can get in Vim or you can get in other editors, but I like VS Code. I think one of the bigger issues from my understanding was that it can be a little bit slower, but I haven't noticed any issues with that.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm also kind of curious, folks who have been in code school or boot camp recently, were you learning in VS Code? Are there other editors that you're using? I'm kind of curious about the state of code school these days.
I was definitely using VS Code, and that was 2020.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the boot camp I did, they were using VS Code.
Yeah, same here. Even I'm using VS Code.
All right.
Larry says Adam.
Nice.
Yeah, I learned in Atom. I went to Epicodus 5 or 6 years ago now and learned in Atom, and I've just had a really hard time giving it up.
There's a lot of similarities.
Oh,
Mhm.
So we had, I think there was somebody who was Atom and there was somebody who was Sublime on our team. And the reason they actually ended up switching was because Visual Code Studio also has the option to do the live share. So you can, pair and mob within the same editor at the same time. It's very useful.
That's why I switched also.
And VS Code has now a fully cloud-based IDE. They have VS Code online. You don't even have to install it. That's way slower than running it on your computer, but it's there.
Yeah, very neat. I was like, oh, maybe I don't even have to have them install the extension and we could just kind of skip that step, although I'm sure it's also useful. But they do not allow certain extensions on the browser version, which was disappointing.
So I started my, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that one of the things that I learned on ESLint this last year was that in the command line, you could fix things, because I was going through and converting a bunch of different files. And so there were a lot of things that I was fixing at once. And it's always nice to go through and look at them all, but there was a lot that was really, really repetitive. And you can do like npx ESLint fix, or I have to look it up. I don't remember exactly what it is, or fix all or something like that. And it will go through and solve like all of those const or var to const type things just all at once, which is kind of nice.
Yeah,
I don't
actually,
remember the exact syntax.
It shows up right here, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
So it says that 2 errors are potentially fixable. So let's run it and see what happens. There we go. Something fixed.
Yeah, and so I
see.
had files that had like 27 errors in them because we were converting from something being an older version of JavaScript to make it into ES6. And so there were a lot of little syntaxy things, and that was super convenient. What were you starting to say, Casey?
Oh, I was just talking about like the IDE wars. I took a Java course a while ago, and the instructor there used IntelliJ, and where I work, everyone uses Eclipse. So that's what I'm using now. Just because there's the config file and the style guide file that like the company has, and they all have their ups and downs. But I think so far I do like VS Code probably more than most. And if I could convince my team to switch to VS Code, I totally would.
You said with Java, is that right?
Yeah, I'm not sure the level of support that VS Code has for Java, but it's the same thing like with Eclipse and IntelliJ. There's a lot of community-based contributions to extensions. So if it's not right now, I'm sure very shortly there will be plenty of support for it.
Back in the day, I don't think there was, which is why so many Java devs are IntelliJ kind of diehards.
Mhm.
But I know when I was learning Java, all of my courses and all of my learning materials started with downloading IntelliJ, but I noticed that VS Code had linting support and all the other support that I needed, including packaging. So I could have kept using VS Code, but just for ease, I also have on this machine IntelliJ.
Yeah, when you're following along with somebody else who's teaching, it's a lot easier to work in the environment they're working in, for sure.
Yeah, I think I've run tiny little programs with Java and VS Code, but that's about it. I also am not. I have not used Java actually. So apart from those tiny little, I think they were people we were interviewing for an open position, and they gave us something in Java, and I was like, okay, here we go. Get to learn how to read Java at the very least for a little bit. So
yeah, I'm much more comfortable with JavaScript, but and in fact, when I did the interview for this company, the first thing I said was, I know Java fairly well, but I haven't touched it in a year. So, and they were actually, it was great. They were very helpful, and they were like, oh, you can't assign it by just typing equals. You have to hit, type dot set, and they would like remind me of certain things. It's like, okay, thank you. I feel like I lucked out with a very supportive team.
It's fabulous.
yeah, for sure. I also always appreciate people who are or teams and companies that are willing to hire, even if it's been a while since you've had experience in a particular language, or you don't have any experience in a particular language, but you can learn. Like those kind of things are always helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I have another friend who's in Southern California who just studied software development for maybe 3 or 4 months, and she just got a job. And she said the company she's working for has realized like there are no senior devs that are looking for jobs right now, because they've all gotten them. So they're taking like people who have very little experience but want to learn, and like they're saying, okay, we're going to teach you for the next 6 months to a year, and then we're going to put you on a project. And I think that's really cool.
Very hard to get senior engineers right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that continues to benefit people who are starting out in the field. They're really hard to find anybody else, so that should make the odds better of people getting jobs.
Yeah, I hope so.
Well, if people don't have any other questions, we'll probably wrap it up right there. But thank you, Mindy. I appreciate how you went through this and the resources that you put together, and all of the resources are great to be able to have that, and walking through us, and even walking through how to install it. Because like Casey was saying, even those of us who've used it before maybe have not gone through the installation process before, or have not done it in a while. So it's nice to be able to see that and talk through it, and I don't think I had. I thought it was even just seeing like Casey going through that in a different order than how I would have, which was not part of what your talk was about, but was part of what the benefit is of all doing this together. I really appreciated. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for letting me be part of your talk.
Thank you for being part of my talk. And I hope it was helpful for folks, even those of you who either don't have mics or weren't super talkative.
All right.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks so much.
Good.
Nice to see you all. And next month, theoretically, I'm looking out the window right now. I know it's dark where you are, Zenzi, but it's blue sky finally here today. So I'm hopeful that our next meetup in another month when we're outside will also be blue sky. So hopefully we'll see some of you
Yes,
then.
hoping that for you. Yes.
Thank you. It's been a long spring. All right. Have a good night, all.
Okay, bye-bye.
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 Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.